My name is Daniel Mercer, and I never thought a piece of paradise could turn into a legal battlefield. I bought my private island in the Florida Keys after years of working in real estate development. It wasn't just luxury, it was escape. White sand beaches, crystal clear water, a single modern villa overlooking the ocean, and complete isolation from everything I wanted to leave behind. No neighbors, no traffic, no noise, just ocean, wind, and peace. At least, that's what I thought I bought. Because 6 months after moving in, I discovered something I never expected. My island was technically inside a newly expanded HOA jurisdiction. I laughed when my lawyer told me, an H for an island. He didn't laugh back. That was my first warning. The HOA was called Coral Bay Coastal Association. On paper, it sounded harmless: beach maintenance, environmental protection, community coordination for nearby mainland properties. But in reality, it was something else: control. And the president of that HOA, a man named Victor Hale, had ambitions far beyond beachfront sidewalks. The first contact came as a letter, then emails, then requests. They claimed there was a historical pathway that once connected mainland docks to my island, and therefore they wanted to establish a public ferry access zone. On my property, on my island. I thought it was a joke. It wasn't. A week later, I saw a boat near my shoreline. Then another. Surveyors. Measuring. Marking. Without permission. I took my speedboat out and approached them directly. A man in a reflective vest looked up and waved casually. We are just mapping the public access corridor. There is no public access, I said. He checked his clipboard. The HOA approved preliminary survey rights. I stared at him. No one approved anything from me. He shrugged like it didn't matter. That moment changed everything. I contacted my attorney immediately. He was quiet after reviewing the documents. Then he said something I didn't expect. They're attempting to establish prescriptive access. What does that mean? If they use it enough without resistance, they can try to argue implied public use. That was the game. Not ownership. Occupation through repetition, so I acted immediately. I installed legal signage across the shoreline. Private island. No trespassing. All access prohibited by law. I documented everything. Drone footage. Photos. Security logs. Every boat. Every approach. Every violation. But the HOA didn't stop. They escalated. 2 weeks later, Victor Hale held a community meeting on the mainland. And I was the main topic. He stood in front of residents and said, "This island is blocking historic community access to the ocean corridor." I wasn't even there, but my name was. "They are refusing cooperation," he continued. "And we believe the public has a right to access coastal waters." That was the narrative shift. From request to right. That's when I knew this was going to court. The next morning, I woke up to something worse. Construction barges, anchoring near my island boundary, not touching land yet, but close enough to test reaction. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I simply called the Coast Guard and my legal team, and waited, because people who overstep rarely understand consequences until they arrive. When the Coast Guard arrived, everything stopped. The officers reviewed my island deed, reviewed maritime boundaries, reviewed HOA claims. And then one of them said the sentence that ended the fantasy. "This is private property. No legal access corridor exists." The barges were ordered to leave immediately. But Victor didn't stop. He doubled down. Now the HOA filed an official injunction request. They claimed environmental necessity, public benefit, emergency access rights. All buzzwords. No evidence. My attorney prepared counterfilings that detailed title ownership history, maritime jurisdiction mapping, illegal surveying activity, unauthorized encroachment logs. It wasn't a debate anymore. It was a legal war. And then came the biggest escalation. Victor sent police, not to arrest me, but to escort compliance inspection. 3 officers arrived on my dock. I met them calmly with my attorney. Victor was not there. But his influence was. One officer said, "We are here to ensure HOA inspection access." I handed him the deed. He read it. Read it again. Then looked at me. "This is not HOA jurisdiction," he said quietly. That was the first crack. But Victor's final mistake came the next week. He tried something illegal. He brought a private contractor to build a temporary public dock extension on the edge of my island waters, without permission, without permits, without legal authority. That was the moment I stopped reacting and started ending it. I filed for emergency restraining orders. My attorney escalated to Federal Maritime Court, and I requested criminal trespass enforcement for repeated violations. The case shifted overnight, from civil dispute to criminal exposure. The day enforcement arrived, everything collapsed. Victor stood at the shoreline, arguing with officials. But no one was listening anymore, because the documents were clear, the law was clear, and his actions were recorded. Repeatedly. I watched from my balcony as officers shut everything down. One by one. Contractors left. Barges pulled away. HOA representatives stopped speaking mid-sentence. When they realized nothing they said mattered. Anymore weeks later. The final hearing ended it. The judge ruled. No public access rights existed. HOA acted beyond legal authority. All encroachment must cease immediately. Future violations would result in penalties. Victor didn't speak after the ruling. He just left the courtroom. And that was the last time I heard from him. Months later, I stood on my dock alone. The island was quiet again. Ocean wind moving through palm trees. No boats. No surveyors. No flags. Just silence. The kind I bought this place for. And I realized something important. People don't fight for land. They fight for the idea that land can be taken. But when ownership is documented and law is enforced, that idea disappears. The island was quiet for almost 2 weeks. After the court ruling, no boats, no survey crews, no HOA emails. At first, I thought it was finally over. But experience teaches you something important in situations like this. Silence is never peace. Sometimes it's preparation. And I was right. The next wave didn't come from construction crews or boats. It came from paperwork. Stacks of it. Delivered to my attorney's office in 3 separate legal filings. The HOA had changed strategy completely. Instead of claiming access, they now claimed environmental violation authority. They alleged that my private island was disrupting marine migration patterns, restricting coastal water flow, and blocking ecological access corridors. It sounded scientific. It wasn't. It was legal noise, designed to confuse, delay, and pressure. My attorney called me immediately. "They're trying a regulatory angle now," he said. "This is escalation." I leaned back in my chair. Can they win it? A pause. Not if your documentation holds, but they can drag this for months. That was the real goal. Not winning. Draining. 3 days later, I saw something new on the horizon. A government environmental vessel. Not HOA this time. Official. Federal markings. 2 inspectors came ashore. They were polite, professional, and completely neutral. But their questions were sharp. Has any part of this island been modified in the last 5 years? Have any seawalls been reinforced? Any dredging activity? I answered everything honestly. No changes. No modifications. No interference with natural flow. They took notes, photographed everything, and left. But before leaving, one of them said something that stayed with me. "Just so you know, we've been asked to review this site twice now by private petitioners." That meant one thing. Victor was pushing harder. The next escalation was psychological. Neighbors on the mainland began receiving letters. Not legal notices. Stories. Printed pamphlets claiming restricted coastal access harms local communities. Private ownership threatens public heritage waters. Emergency evacuation routes blocked by private holdings. My island had become a symbol in someone else's narrative war. And I wasn't even speaking. That's when I decided to stop reacting privately and start responding publicly. I hired a maritime law expert. then a communications consultant, and I released a formal legal statement through my attorney's firm. It was simple, direct, unemotional, but devastating in its clarity. It listed full deed ownership, federal maritime compliance, no public easement rights, documented HOA trespass attempts, false environmental claims submitted without evidence. It ended with one sentence: any further unauthorized action will be treated as intentional interference with private property rights and pursued accordingly. Within 48 hours, everything changed tone, because now it wasn't just my word. It was public record. But Victor still didn't stop. He made his final move. And this one was dangerous. He attempted to get the county to declare my island part of a coastal emergency evacuation study zone. On paper, it sounded harmless. In reality, it was a legal backdoor attempt to create access authority, temporary emergency use rights. The county initially entertained it. That was enough. Because once a system considers something, it becomes real risk. My attorney went into overdrive. He filed emergency objections, submitted historical title evidence, and requested immediate dismissal of the claim. But the real turning point came from an unexpected place: the Coast Guard. They reviewed the evacuation proposal and rejected it outright. Their statement was simple: no operational necessity, no jurisdictional requirement, private land unaffected. That was the final institutional rejection, and it broke the momentum completely. After that, Victor disappeared from public communication for a while. No emails, no filings, no meetings. And then, suddenly, he called me directly. I answered. He didn't sound confident anymore. He sounded tired. "You've made this very difficult," he said. I stayed calm. "You made it difficult the moment you tried to override ownership law." He paused, then said something interesting. "I thought the community would support this." I replied, "Communities support fairness, not appropriation." Silence again. Then he said quietly, "This isn't over," and hung up. But it was over. Not because of emotion, because of structure. Within weeks, the final legal dismissal came through. Every HOA claim rejected. Every environmental assertion invalidated. Every procedural attempt denied. And a formal warning issued against further harassment or false filings. That part mattered most, because it meant continuation would have consequences. Real ones. Months later, I stood on the shoreline at sunrise. The island was exactly how I bought it. Unchanged. Undisturbed. Oceans stretching endlessly in front of me. And I realized something simple but important. This wasn't really about an island, or an HOA, or even law. It was about assumption. The assumption that silence equals permission. That distance equals vulnerability. That private land is negotiable if pressure is high enough. But assumptions don't hold up in court. Or reality. Only documentation does. The ocean wind moved through the palms. And for the first time in a long time, there was nothing left to fight.